We're talking with Michael Elias. You Can Go Home Now is the title of his new book that comes out in June, and we're very happy to have him. He's a very prolific screenwriter. And Michael, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Michael, what is this book, You Can Go Home, about? It's a literary thriller, but tell us what the storyline is.
Well, it's the story is about a young woman who is a homicide detective in Queens, and she's given the task of investigating cold case murders of men. They've been dead for a few years, most of them, and she finds a connection that all their widows, at the time these men were murdered, their alibi or where they were all in a battered women's shelter. And it turns out that these men were abusive. And to find if the shelter has anything to do with these men's deaths, she goes undercover into the shelter, posing as an abused woman, and I won't tell you what happens.
No.
That's basically the story.
Yes, okay. Yes. Well, she does learn. She befriends a girl named Haneen, and Haneen is, well, maybe I'll be telling too much of the story, but something happens to Haneen which throws Nina into a terrible conflict. So can you tell us anything about that without? Well,
she's got a dual role. I mean, at the same time she's in the shelter, and we get to meet women and children who are in the shelter, hiding from their abusive spouses who are either threatening to kill them or would kill them when they came out. And one of them is Haneen, who is an American Afghani woman who is hiding out because her family has arranged a marriage for her to someone unknown. And she's a thoroughly modern, contemporary American woman working at an investment bank. And if she doesn't, she's in danger of being a victim of what's called an honor killing. And that happens. And so anyway, Nina, the police, our police homicide detective, has a kind of a dual role that is in conflict. On the one hand, she's posing as an abused wife, and on the other hand, she's still a cop, and she has to protect the people in the shelter without giving her identity.
Something really, really horrific from her past has happened. Do we want to tell them?
Sure. The reason Nina became a police woman was her father was a Planned Parenthood doctor who was assassinated by a radical fanatic, anti-abortion fanatic, and she is looking for the man who killed her father and basically destroyed her family. And because this novel is about revenge and about protection, she's made a vow to, when she finds this assassin and she's on his trail, she's going to kill him and not be police. She's going to be an avenging angel, as it were. Yeah, and that's also a conflict for her as a police officer, and at the same time someone who's bent on revenge, which reflects, I think, our own admiration or our infatuation with revenge, which we see in popular culture. We see it in our movies. We root for the bad guy to be killed by the good guy, whether it's Clint Eastwood or Denzel Washington or cowboys. We see that all the time. That's a staple of our culture. And at the same time, we're told that it's wrong. So that's a conflict. And I think my novel examines that, or tries to.
Yeah, at the heart of the story, though, is the question, like, how far would you go to seek that justice? And that's a very interesting question. Nina writes to her mother, she says, forgiveness is overrated.
Yeah,
Is
that's right.
it?
Yeah. It's we're told to forgive, maybe not forget, but we're told to forgive. We're also told that the law will provide justice, and Nina doesn't buy it. This occurred when she was young, when she was 16, and she says, I think she says, had it occurred later, I might have, when I was older, but at the time it sealed me. It became the modus, the rest of my life, that I was going to fulfill this. Her mother is destroyed. Her son is her brother, younger brother, and she wants revenge. Right.
Well, now let's turn to your writing career. Almost all of your credits are in screenwriting and directing. We know the names of these shows: the new Dick Van Dyke Show, Steve Martin, A Wild and Crazy Guy, your Young Doctors in Love, The Jerk with Steve Martin, and so many more. So I'm curious as to what prompted you to make the leap to novel writing.
That's a good question. I think Hollywood writing is basically collaboration. All those names you mentioned, one writes with other people. You don't write by yourself for the most part. You write in collaboration with other writers. You collaborate with directors. You listen to actors telling you how they want their lines changed, and movie stars insisting that they want their lines changed. And that's the way it is. You have writing staffs, you have writing rooms. And I think for me, there was always this ambition to write by myself and not argue with anybody, and take all the credit and all the blame. And and I think it was important for me to tell my own stories. That coincided with a kind of friendly divorce from television, and movies got harder and harder to finance and make. And I found that I had a real affection for writing novels, fiction, short stories. And
right. And this is not your first novel. You can go home now. There's another one, Lush Life. Tell me about that.
Well, Lush Life Lush Life is
Lush Life is a movie.
It's a movie, yeah, that I wrote about two jazz musicians, and it was played by Forrest Whitaker and Jeff Goldblum, and I was because it was, I guess, my first solo screenplay. I also insisted on directing it, so I would have what I thought would be total control, and that was a novel. I mean, I'm sorry, not a novel. That was a screenplay and a film, basically about two dear friends who are jazz musicians, and that was it. The other novel, the first novel I wrote, is called The Last Conquistador, which came out of a visit to Peru, and coming back, letting my imagination run wild. And I said to myself, what if there's an Inca city in the Amazon that's still alive? And
wonderful.
So I wrote that.
Yeah. Let's see. The dialogue in You Can Go Home Now is razor sharp, and much of it, I think the last 2/3 maybe reads a little more like a movie script. Where did you learn to write such effective dialogue, and do you find that helpful in novel writing?
Thank you for the compliment, and I think yes, it does come out of my screenwriting techniques. Tell a story through action, dialogue, and I guess keep it moving. As far as the authenticity or the verve or whatever of the dialogue, I also think that comes out of many years of writing comedy and making sure that people laugh and to be economical and have twists and turns as one goes along. Yeah, I think I'm a pretty good dialogue writer.
Yes, you are.
Oh, thank you.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. We talked about Lush Life, and you had said that it was cursed because it wasn't commercially viable. And I'm wondering, well, what is commercially viable today, especially in the movie world?
I don't know. Commercially, I think William Goldman, who said nobody knows anything
Yes.
about movie business. Things appear and they become commercially viable. Obviously, we have an appetite for action adventure. We have an appetite for thrillers. We like to be we like to be scared. We like to wonder what's going to happen next. We like to be impressed, and that's what movies do. And when one comes out and does it in a way that we've never seen it before, wow, that's different. That's great. And so it goes back to, not goes back to, but, and people are always surprised. Star Wars wasn't supposed to be the big summer hit for 20th Century Fox. It was something called Thunder Alley or something about a giant tank. And then they had this movie called Star Wars. And they said, okay, we'll see how it does. And that's what happened. Easy Rider surprised everybody. And then everybody, and what happens is when somebody makes a movie that kind of sneaks up on you and it's a huge success, they start making more like them because that one works, maybe the others will.
Well, which writing formats do you personally find rewarding? Is novel writing more rewarding to you than script writing, or about even, or
well, there's a different thing. If the movie gets made, it's very rewarding.
Right. Sometimes that takes years.
yeah, and if but I would say that the process of writing the novel is very rewarding when it goes well, and when it's finished and you get to read it and people, and especially if it gets published, that's really rewarding. But
how many edits do you have to go through to get what you really feel is finished work?
Well, as some writer said, art is never finished; it's merely abandoned.
Yes.
And I think that I could go on forever rewriting and making, oh my gosh, I could fix that. I can make that better. But at a certain point, you have to let it go. And then going back to the original question, many drafts. And as much as I claim that writing a novel, say, is a solitary experience, actually it isn't, because I ask friends to read, I get comments, I get notes, I work with editors, and I guess in that sense it's collaborative too.
Right.
Yeah.
If you could do your career all over again, what would you do differently?
Um, I, I think uh, I think I would be less. Um, uh, this is a funny thing. I mean, not funny, but this is. I would be less ambitious in a funny kind of way. That I would concentrate. I'm not very good at business, and I would have listened to people who were wiser than I was in the business, not in the writing, but in the business. So sometimes I think that I could have taken advice that was given and I didn't. But I'm happy with. I don't have any regrets. I don't. I really like where I am. I like what I've done, and I've had a great experiences and collaborations and friendships with the most wonderful, interesting people one could ever want to work with or meet. So I don't have an empire. I don't have 50 television shows running at the same time, but I have enough. I'm content.
Oh, I think it should be very rewarding for you. What do you consider your best work?
Well, I would say there's parts of a lot of things are my best work. I think parts of Lush Life are my best work, and I think sometimes I reread parts of my novels, and I say, "Gee, who wrote that? That's pretty good." Turns out to be me.
I think you can be very proud.
Uh,
um,
sometimes I go back and I look at old episodes of Head of the Class that I wrote with Rich Eustace, and I say, "Wow, they're really pretty good. Not
right.
bad, not bad." Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we writers need to always remember to pat ourselves on the back because it can get pretty grueling sometimes. Um, has your career as a screenwriter helped you land a book deal?
No, I don't think so. I I think when you write a novel, I mean, may have gotten me help get agents to read my book, but I don't think my career, my past. I think we finish a novel. We all start out even in a way, in terms of how it's going to be received, whether an agent will take it, whether a publisher will publish it. So no, I don't. I never. I didn't consider. I don't think I've ever considered. Wow, you're getting a novel by the guy who wrote The Jerk. Nah, doesn't.
What projects are you working on now?
Well,
We want you to give us more.
yeah. Thank you. I'm into a new thriller, um, and it takes place in Maui. And it's about a man whose wife disappeared in the sea. That might be the title. She disappeared on a night diving expedition, snorkel diving. Scuba diving. And there was a storm, and the boat was turned over, and everybody made it to shore except her. And he's haunted by this and tries to find and wants to find out what happened to her.
Ah, very interesting. And now, what words of inspiration can you give to writers and readers in these challenging times, to creative people?
Two creative people. Well, we're all in this together, and if we can write and live and stay alive and well, it's a blessing. We can take people out of their lives in amazing ways through exotic locales, wonderful stories, interesting characters, and if we can do that, that's a real gift, and it's what we do, and it's If we can do that, that's a real gift, and it's what we do, and it's needed. All the arts are needed.